I found an old calico sign here that I used to use. It says here, see your town from there in the Clem Swallow, file of Forgan Smith. I used to select a paddock somewhere within reasonable distance of Newcastle, and I'd land on this paddock beside a main highway that was a busy highway, stick the calico sign up on the three-rail, split-rail fence, and wait. The cars would pull up, climb through the fence, hand over their 5 shillings for a 5-minute ride, so you go round the area for 5 minutes and land. You do quite a good bit of business. One place was just on the western edge of Richmond. There's a paddock there that, looking at it now, I wonder how we used to use it. It only looked to be about 400 feet long, but it was good enough for these old aeroplanes.
Veteran pilot Bill Forgan Smith talking about barnstorming around New South Wales in the 30s. Hello, I'm Tim Bowden with some stories from Vanishing Australia, because the anecdotes on this tape are about a past which now only exists in memory. Like the era pilots of the ilk of Bill Forgan Smith, who tend to think aviation today is dull compared with the pioneering days. Dull perhaps, but probably safer. Bill began his flying career in the 30s, and I talked to him about the style of aviation in Australia before the war.
I remember once sitting in Newcastle, a fellow came over and said, "Could you take me to Binnaway?" I said, "Well, I don't know where Binnaway is." He says, "Near Coonabarra Brand." I said, "Well, where's that?" He said, "Well, you know where Willow Tree is?" I said, "Yeah, I know that." He said, "You get me to Willow Tree and I'll get you to Binnaway, because it's due west of Willow Tree." I said, "Fair enough. Where do we land?" He said, "Oh, I land anywhere. It's all wheat fields. Plenty of room to land up there." So we set off up the Hunter Valley, over Scone, over Murrurundi to Willow Tree, turned due west. After a little while he's pointing down, so I saw this town ahead, so put the nose down and we circled the town, and so I started to look around, but I didn't realise that wheat was almost ready to harvest, and it would be too high to land because the exhaust would catch it on fire. So we circled around for a bit, and eventually he said where he lived, and I landed on the road beside it, folded the wings of the aeroplane, pushed over beside the fence, and we stopped there. And before long, there were a few steers out having a look around and wanting to have a ride in it, and then one of them got round to the front, said to his mate, he said, "Gee, I can't see how it works. It's got 7 cylinders. It was a 7-cylinder radial engine, little Pobjoy, about 80 horsepower, and I said, "You know, one's a spare." He said, "I knew it couldn't work with an odd number." So anyway, a policeman came up and I said, "What are you doing here?" I told him. I brought this fella up and couldn't find where to land because the grass was too high, so we decided to sit down here. And he said, some people asked me then, what about a flight in it? They'd pay for it, so I said, "What do you reckon?" The policeman said, "Oh, there's not much traffic around. I'll keep it clear for you, right?" So I gave him a ride, and I joyrided for the 2 days I was there, because these things used to run on spirit, so you could just get down to the garage and get a couple of tins of motor spirit and fill it up. They only burnt 4 gallons an hour, so you could run 8 hours on 2 tins of spirit nearly. And we took off from there on Monday and went home, back to Newcastle.
Tell me about what you were saying about cross-country flying and how you used to have to organise that.
Oh, well, there were no maps in those days, and most of us used to just get an ordinary shell road map, and they were accurate enough to plot a course on them. The distances were accurate between towns, and you found your way around by railway lines. I mean, a lot of times, weather was bad, you're flying along under it, you'd see a railway station, you'd go down and have a look at the name on the station and pinpoint yourself that way. But most of the time, you steered a compass course and on time and watched drift. Most of the times where you went to land anywhere, you used to ring the shell fellow and say, "Well, I'll be there about 2 o'clock and I want 6 gallons or 8 gallons, and I'll circle the depot and I'll follow you out to where we land," because most of the times you didn't know where to land. And you'd follow him out by circling around as he drove out, and you'd pull up at the fence and see the paddock you was going to, have a look at it and pick your wind out by looking at smoke or the way the grass was bending or the tree, land and refuel and go on your way. They were the good old days, all right. Found your own way around and sat down more or less where you liked. The fun's gone out of it today with all the control and so on, but I suppose it was needed. Used to go up to Gloucester, land beside the road there and joyride there. We used to go up to Old Bar in the holiday periods and joyride off the Old Bar airstrip on the edge of the beach from Taree. And tea gardens out of Newcastle. You can't see where we used to land there, just a swamp it seems. But we had these little areas, it was all okay. We got used to them and made quite a bit of money out of it.
And obviously for most people, first time.
Oh yes, in those days it was a thing for an aeroplane to land. They'd run for miles to see an aeroplane. Most of them was the first time in an aeroplane. And 5 bob, 5 minutes, 10 bob, 10 minutes, that's the way it worked. And you got plenty of takers.
Any hairy moments in those days?
Oh, I don't think so. You worry was weather, wandering around. But you got to know the coastline, and if you're on the coast, and that's it. The usual method of coming out from, if you're flying out from the west, the Sydney area, the last thing you might see would be around the Lithgow area, and it'd be all socked in with cloud underneath, so you'd fly due east, sitting on top of the cloud, and reckon you're over Sydney, give it another few minutes, and then go down under and break under 200 or 300 feet out over the water, and then turn back due west and pick up the beach. Sometimes you were north of Manly, sometimes you were down near Wollongong, so you'd find your way up the coast and pick up Mascot and land. That was the normal procedure, yes.
You went through cloud?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. You weren't in it long enough to be worried, you're only going down.
No instruments, though?
No instruments. You didn't have that. You said what they say, the feel of your backside. You just hope you're doing the right thing. But it was the only way, and it was the accepted practice, and all the pilots did it. And gradually they got instruments and got used to flying on instruments, and it grew up.
Do you think that, in a way, the pilots had more idea of weather in those days?
Oh, I would think so. They were more conscious of it because it was so vital to them. Today, aeroplanes go up through it so fast. I mean, icing and all that doesn't worry them today with a jet. They go up so fast through it that there's nothing to it. They sit on top and break under. When we were flying in the old piston days, well, you were either right down underneath, or you had to be in it because you couldn't get high enough to get over it.
What are the qualities that made a good pilot in those early days?
I think they were a different type of bloke. They had to have a bit of, had to be a bit game, I think, or a bit mad probably. But game, have a bit of courage, I think, was the word you'd use for it, I think. Because you'd set off and you had to rely on your ability to get to where you were going.
It's giving it a go, isn't the kind of phrase you hear these days, is it, when you talk about flying somewhere?
No, it's true. Well, press on regardless and all this sort of thing, but you didn't do that. Your aeroplanes were so slow, I think, that you could do much more in, and you were more with it. You were sitting out in the open anyway, stick your head over the side, but with the closed cabin jobs going much faster, you haven't got as much time to make up your mind to do something. You see, at 80 mile an hour, you'd slow down to probably 55, 60 when the weather was duff and find your way along a coastline. You always got a cloud base, particularly out over off the edge of the water, follow the breaker line along and so on, but there was no other thing to do for it in those days. You were pioneering all the time, and so you had to try and make it so that if you set out to go somewhere that you'd get there, otherwise people wouldn't rely on it. They'd go by train or motor car.
Well, that was the other element, wasn't it? You had to prove that you were reliable, which led to a certain amount of, well, I guess, risk-taking at times.
Oh, you'd take a lot of risk, I suppose, yeah, sure. Compared with today, there are risks. Today, you know precisely where you are all the time. You get all the aids in the world, which is good. It's necessary. And today they can schedule their aeroplane to the minute and know that it'll be there in that minute. The reliability's there with the engines and the airframe, and the crews are well trained. Most of the fellas learned to fly instruments themselves in those days.
Bill Forgan Smith made a name for himself flying DC-3s in Papua New Guinea in the immediate post-war years. Like other pilots of his generation, he would not shrink from any assignment, even freighting plane loads of monkeys from Asia to Australia.
Qantas were bringing monkeys out when the Salk vaccine was being manufactured, and we were getting wherever we could. And I brought a heap of them over in Dhaka. We had 1,500 monkeys on this DC-4 out of Dhaka. It was good revenue earning for the natives. But, boy, you get £5 extra for dry cleaning and you needed it. Wherever we parked, you're at least half a mile from the aerodrome. You couldn't even get near yourself. Boy, 1,500 monkeys on an aeroplane. You couldn't breathe. We had them for a day and a night to get them back to Australia. We found that somebody had put £1,000 more fuel on than we'd asked for. With the result, when we went out and checked, we found we were £1,000 overload, and strictly in line with the rules of an airline operation, we tried to get £1,000 of fuel sucked out, but we couldn't find the refuelling crew. They'd gone, disappeared, went on the strip, couldn't locate them anywhere. And about 5:45, the airport manager for BOAC, can't remember his name, came and said, this station closes at 1800 hours, which is 6 o'clock local time, and you'll be here till 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I said, well, fair enough, let's work it out. And we worked it, and we found we had 2,000 or 3,000 feet length to spare, even with £1,000 overload. So we said, well, we've got to go. Otherwise, stay the night. Probably half the monkeys will die with the heat in the aeroplane, the heat they generate themselves. The two attendants that were with them said they were starting to suffer distress. We'd been there over an hour and a half now arguing a toss about it. So I said, let's go. So we lined up, did our run up, got roaring down the strip, and just we got about a third of the way along the run, the lights went out. So we just carried on and roared into the air. We called the tower, called and called and called, and couldn't get a reply. And eventually Calcutta heard us and called up and says, Dakar goes off the air at 1800 hours. It is now 1805. So we said, right, we departed Dakar for Singapore at 1803, and that's it. So they just switched everything off. Radio, nothing. We're on our own. We wouldn't do that anywhere else but in a country like that, I think. That's the regulation, so the switch goes off at 6 o'clock.